Hi, Steve. It's Robbie from NAPS. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yes. So, for those of you who may not know Steve, he has been an integral part of our community here in Nashville with the National Autism Peer Support Group. He is a meeting facilitator, just awesome contributor and leader. Steve is a musician, a talented musician here in the Nashville music industry. He's an entrepreneur. He is a late identified autistic person and just has a really interesting story to share and a lot of life experience and insight in the autistic journey. So, Steve, again, thank you for taking time out of your super busy schedule to be with us today. And I just wanted to start with asking you what led to you discovering that you might be autistic?
Well, I'm late diagnosed, to be specific. I didn't really figure that out till I was 47 or 48 years old. So prior to that, I would say that I did have a counselor mention that they thought I was ADD. And so in some talks with that counselor, um, you know, I got on some meds for ADD, which really didn't work well for me. And at one point, as I was starting to think that autism could be a part of my world, I mentioned that to this counselor who insisted that I could not be autistic because I had empathy, and I'm thankful that at that point, which is now 20, probably 20 years ago, 15 at least, that I had enough presence of mind and faith in myself and my legs underneath me to go, I'm going to continue looking for answers because I knew in my heart that she was dealing with old information and stereotypes that were not accurate. So, and we're still combating a lot of that in the general world. People form a view from the very limited information that they have in front of them, and clearly as you get to know all the people, like just like the people in our group, it's a varied it's people from all different every sort of profession and all different socioeconomic strata, and so it doesn't pay well to stereotype anyone, especially where autism is concerned, because it's wildly divergent.
It is wildly divergent, and I think it was a few months ago, I was digging into it. There are some theories that actually ADD, ADHD, and autism are basically kind of different manifestations of the same general spectrum, because it's something like 60 to 80% of diagnosed autistic people also have co-occurring ADHD, and something like 40 to 60% of diagnosed ADHD people also later are found to have co-occurring autism. So there's so much overlap, and I think a lot of the confusion is because it is kind of this kind of a spectrum rather than a linear thing, and there's a lot of overlap, and then for a lot of us it can present in different ways, right? And so I think putting the pieces together using old medical and social paradigms can be challenging. I think there's been a lot of progress in the last few years, and like you, I was diagnosed about a year and a half ago now at age 47, almost 48. And I fell through the cracks forever because I was a high masking female. And you get a lot of that. Well, you have empathy, you can make eye contact, you write well, you speak well, you're kind
You're
of quirky, but you just kind of nerdy, quirky, whatever. But nobody thinks that. And being able to get somebody who actually listen to you and understand that it's not what they were looking at 30 years ago is so outdated and was so biased and just really, I think, fundamentally flawed. Um, from the beginning is huge. And so it really impacted our generation, kind of like, our generation and before, kind of missing generations in this. But I think with more awareness, it is getting better. But again, there's so much more that needs to be done, and so much more understanding just about how all of it presents. So you had mentioned that you had tried medication for ADD that wasn't helpful, which makes perfectly good sense because you have all these other things. And with autism and ADHD, you have things that can be complementary that help each other, and then things that are diametrically opposed. And so sometimes treating one actually exacerbates the other. And then there are some things where they actually balance each other naturally, and it's fine. So it can be um, super complicated. But no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because I think what happens with a lot of our community, especially previously, is we came at it from one perspective or the other. It's either possible autism or it's ADHD, and there wasn't this idea that it could be both. And in some places still for years you could not get a dual diagnosis. They thought it was not, it couldn't happen, which is scary if these are the experts, right? And they're telling us
Yeah.
what's like super obvious. But so continuing on that, so once you were like, hey, no, we're going to drill down because I know there's something else going on, then what happened with you from there?
Well, it was a very slow roll with me finding autism as a piece of my life. I think I had it in my mind from my working with that counselor. As I said, I walked out of there going, I don't have the answers, but I have to keep looking for the answers. So that's basically what I'm still doing 15 or 20 years later. And I've got a lot of answers. I've done tons of, as all of us have. I've done a ton of research on this, and all just confirming what I thought, in the first place. Finally, I think what finally got me convinced that I was autistic, I saw something on PBS that was very descriptive of what autism, and at that time they may have been calling it Asperger's, whatever. But I saw a special on that, and that really was when the bell went off. That's when the light bulb kind of lit up, and I went, "Holy crap, that's me!" And so from that point, I was like, "This is probably early 2000s," and there just wasn't a lot of support or anywhere to go to be in meeting with other people. There were a few books and things, and I availed myself of the few books I could find, uh, but there was not a lot of info out there for us, sadly. So I kind of took what I could find and kind of like breadcrumbs, following the breadcrumbs of the trail. And I learned a little bit about myself. I learned about the particular problems that I encounter, things like sensitivity to sound and light. Sensory stuff is a problem for me. I flood and I wear out pretty quickly in social situations. So I looked hard at social situations, and everything that I was reading in books. Well, not everything, but enough things that I was reading in books to go, okay, I got to find out more about this, and I'm still digging to this day.
It's funny how so many of us on this journey trying to figure out if we're autistic do the quintessential autistic thing and deep dive research into
That
it, right?
that,
It's
that in
funny.
itself should be an indication that
Yes, yes, it absolutely is. And so I know, like, for me, I was super lucky. I got referred. I went to an autistic meeting for another group, and there was a young lady who recommended the one who diagnosed me, who is herself a late diagnosed autistic, on AuDHDer, and that was wonderful talking to somebody who actually understands. But it's you mentioned like the environmental sensitivity, which I think can be a huge thing for a lot of us who are, ASD level 1 or what used to be Asperger's. I identify as Asperger's because to me that makes more sense in my mind and makes more sense to other people. But I think for a lot of us, that is a huge issue because many of us do not have communication issues in the classical autistic definition. And so it can present to us as being bombarded with the lights and the noise and stuff. And then that reduces our capacity to be able to be with people because there's already just so much coming at us. And so for you, because you are in the music industry, which is a lot of light and a lot of sound and a
Yes.
lot of people and a lot of social nuances and a lot of different kinds of hours and actually being really high masking, right? Because in the entertainment industry, regardless of your masking, and what we think of autistic masking, as an entertainer, you have your entertainer
Yeah.
face, right?
I'm asking his
Yeah.
son.
Yeah. So I feel like for autistic creatives and those in particularly like front facing, right? You have kind of like the double masking going on. And so how have you navigated um all of this, right? I mean, just all the environment input and the double masking and all of this stuff in your journey as a musician, as creating your business presence, and getting your gigs and plugging in and stuff. What does that look like for you? Kind of trying to synthesize all of this stuff and keep it together for the duration of the time that you have to do it and maintaining what you need to do for your presence in the industry and still taking care of yourself.
Well, it's not an ideal fit. I'm not going out on a limb saying that it's not an ideal fit because it's mostly all social. It's mostly all loud. It's kind of everybody's nightmare if you have sensory issues, and so that's a part of it. And I just didn't have any other way to go or any particular other way that I wanted to go.
Mhm.
So I did the best I could, and for a long time, um, didn't realize that my autism was handicapping me when I would run out of sensory spoons, and my abilities would suffer. My actual performance would suffer. Not enough to keep me from ever working and stuff, but enough to at least make me kind of stop and shake my head and going, what is going on here? And then when I found out that I was autistic, I simply started down the road of what can I do to mitigate the problems. So I've tried every possible earplug that cuts out this amount of sound and the highs and the lows and the mediums. And, I sometimes wear hats or a cowboy hat on stage, and people would think, well, oh, so you're doing that for show, or you doing that for this and that. And the truth is, what got me into wearing that cowboy hat with a flap on the front that goes down is that I simply couldn't stand the light shining on stage. And so I kind of looked at Charlie Daniels, and he had that big hat with the bottom brim that kind of pointed down. And I said, I'm doing that. And everybody thought, well, it's, oh, you're doing this or you're doing that. And it was like, I didn't even bother to tell them. But basically, that was sensory induced because I could go periscope up, periscope down. I could see what's going on if I wanted to lift my head up, or I could lower it if I needed to get out of the lights. So it's that little cat and mouse kind of game
Mhm.
that's always going on for me.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% can see that. And what you were saying about like the ear plug thing is 100% true because I've tried like I sleep in foam earplugs because like the loops are too hard for me. But even like I have the loop brand, and we're not advocating for any particular brand. This is just what I have. And I have like the Quiet, which is supposed to be like the max, and it does help a lot. But autistic hearing, if you are not, you know, someone who has a hearing impairment otherwise, um, is very, very acute. And there's only so much you can do with earplugs to block it. And the same thing with hats and sunglasses and eye masks and all kinds of things. It's like somehow if there's any ray, tiny beam of light or any little sound anywhere, we get it, right? For those of us who have that as a primary manifestation of autistic traits, it's a thing. So I 100% understand. And it was funny as you were saying that, it was making me wonder how many other musicians that wear hats, it's not just their persona that maybe they're kind of block light too,
I'm
and nobody
sure,
knows.
I'm sure it's not. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know that you have shared previously that and so they told you you had ADD, so obviously you like you have co-occurring conditions. And so I know because I'm also an AuDHDer that even in the absence of hyperactivity, it's our brains that go all the
Oh, yeah.
time, right? Um, and so that can be so much to manage because it's like the ADHD brain just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and the autistic brain is so tired of all of it. It's just like there's so much, and it can be hard to shut down at night, and then it can be hard to get going in the morning. And I know a lot of people they try different medical interventions which work well for some people and not for others. Like you had mentioned, you were on some kind of a prescription for ADD, which wasn't super helpful, and that can be conflicting. Some of us deal with, you know, self-medication through alcohol or other natural alternatives that may not be legal in some places. Um, and you know different things. Others turn to like spiritual practices like meditation and that kind of thing. I know you have shared that meditation has been super helpful for you. So is there anything, would you like to share kind of your experience with how you got into that and what that has looked like for you?
Substances or meditation? Where should we go?
Both, either.
Okay. Um, Substances, it was uh, being a musician, you know, there's a lot of time spent in bars. So it's very hard not to kind of go down that road a little bit. I just went down that road more. And quite honestly, it worked very well for me when I first started. I used alcohol or whatever substance as my social grease, and it allowed me to kind of tamp down that anxiety, that constant inner anxiety, trying to figure out social cues and what was going on and stuff. You know, if I have a few drinks or whatever, my inhibitions would go down and I'd feel a little bit better about what I was doing. And that worked pretty well for a small period of years. And then all of a sudden it wasn't working well. And I had to quit. And I quit while I was playing 5, 6 nights a week in country bars, 5 hours a night, you know, in front of a bunch of people drinking. And I was white knuckling that hard, and it was not easy. I would say if you have a choice between not starting or stopping after you've started, this would be a good thing for you not to start. Yeah, just in my personal view, do what you want, but uh, it's much easier to not go down that road than to backtrack. So uh, so when I couldn't, when I couldn't use substances, yeah, I was looking for anything else that would quiet my mind down, even just the tiniest bit. I happened to go to a yoga class at the Donaldson Y. Walked in there on a whim one time and happened into a wonderful yoga class by taught by a woman who became the president of the Nashville Yoga Society. So I walked into a real good situation, and that got me into meditation, and very very hard for me to sit. It's very hard for anybody in this life, in this day and age, to take 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 minutes and sit still. It's very, very difficult. And me having the hyper brain, it's especially difficult. But the chatter and craziness in my brain was driving me crazy. And when I walked into that yoga class, I wasn't going there for the physical part of it. I was going there for the mental part of it, specifically because I remember thinking internally, I have to slow my brain down. I have to slow my brain down. And I found it there. Both yoga gets you your body and your mind, yoking your mind and your body. It works. It works because if you're concentrate simply standing in a pose, concentrating on your breath, at that point, you're not thinking about your to-do list. You're not thinking about what you have to buy for Aunt Sandy for Christmas or whatever it is. You're simply thinking about how am I not going to fall down, and so you're in your body at that point, and that was exactly what I needed. And the meditation aspect is pretty much a continuation of the same thing. I couldn't sit. I mean, if I could sit for 5 minutes starting out, that was a miracle, you know. But I did it because once I started to notice that it made me feel better or give me a little bit of an island in the storm, a little bit of foundation so that I would not get knocked off my pin so easily. Once I saw the benefit of it, I was in, and from that point, I would do whatever it took, to spend some time with it. And it's still very much of a challenge, but it's a good thing.
One thing I know is because I'm very much interested in meditation and somatic processing and all that kind of thing too. And I had actually gone to a few yoga classes at the Y that used to be at the Christ Church Nashville, which has since closed when I lived over there. But one thing that I found too that I liked with that, in addition to like being centering and obviously working your body and working the energy out, is the studios were usually fairly dimly lit and it was quiet. And
Yeah.
I think that in addition to our overactive brain being bombarded by sensory input actually exacerbates the overactive brain because there's more there's our physical stuff that we're thinking about, and then there's our internal thought process about everything else. And it's so hard to shut down when you have it coming at you from outside and you have it inside, right? And so I think being in an environment like that where you're forced to come back into your body, which can be challenging for most people now anyway, but particularly for neurodivergent people, and kind of minimizing this and quieting what's going on in here and just being and stopping for a minute is huge. So and I think it's a great alternative because I think a lot of people, in addition to any like trauma-based stuff, and actually a lot of neurodivergent people have trauma and bullying backgrounds just because we're different and people do things, in addition to whatever else may have happened in our lives, and the constant environmental stuff coming at us. Using substances is a quick and easy way to actually dull the sensory overload, right? So in the same way that alcohol or cannabis or whatever can slow your reaction time to things in a way that's dangerous, people use it because it's not just a mental or emotional thing. It literally can make the neon, the flashing lights in the club and the noise and all this stuff tolerable. Like grew up in Austin, Texas, which was at one point, the live music capital. And I grew up in the clubs, and all my friends were musicians, and I was there all the time. And I love dancing. And so I was just like, I was there like every night dancing or whatever, but I was also drinking. And um, I think it was because of that 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 helped me to handle the lights. And I love the music, I love the dancing, but that's a lot of junk coming at you. And
No doubt.
um, so even though I was having fun and all that and doing something that I enjoyed, I think, and of course that's part of the culture too, is that did help being able to handle the strobe lights from 10 o'clock at night till 3 or 4 in the morning or whatever. And I think that that can be a lot for people, and even outside of like the club thing, for basically anybody who's having to work in an environment they can't control, that has the fluorescent lights in the office or the grocery store or the warehouse, or the whatever, and the sirens and the traffic and all this stuff. It's like just
It's a nightmare.
existing. Yeah, just existing. If you leave your house,
It's a
you
lot of
know
work.
yeah, it's just so much, and it's exhausting, and it can creep up on you because you think, okay, this doesn't bother anybody else. Like, it shouldn't be that much of a thing. Like, what's wrong with me that I haven't done
I'm weak.
anything all day? And, really, and I'm like, I feel dead. And it's just like, yeah, because you've been bombarded. Yeah.
Yep.
So absolutely. Um, so then coming into this, to circle back to something you said earlier, is like you are creative, and even though maybe being in the spotlight, playing gigs was not necessarily the best fit, did you find that having your own business this way helped you kind of navigate a lot of the issues that a lot of people in our community have with employment and the corporate structure and the lights and the noise and the weird
Right.
social things and stuff that we deal with? Was um in addition to your own like creative bent, did did some of that factor into your decision to kind of forge your own path outside of the corporate structure?
Yeah, I couldn't exist in that corporate structure if I wanted to. So that that was made, that decision was made pretty easy. I had some jobs, and I've done things from time to time, to supplement my income. Uh, but for any number of reasons, the 9 to 5 thing is difficult. It's challenging. I'll just put it that way. That's a challenging environment for me to live in, for all the reasons that we talk about, all the sensory stuff, the uh, authority and hierarchy, and this and that, and social things. Am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Is this expected of me? Is that, how do I read this? And all of those things. The jobs I had when I first got out of high school, I think, in typical terms, like you would hear most autistic people say, whether they're working at Denny's, or whether they're making 6 figures and in a high tech corporate environment, many of them go, I was going along and I was doing great for a year or two at this place, and then I just burned out. And I said some things, or some situations went sideways that I didn't understand, and this happened, and this thing piled on, and before you knew it, I was out of a job. And I think for me, that was kind of the way I could see it. I could see it going in front of me. And I won't say that my pursuing music, or doing that as a career was a way to not be in that workaday world, but it fit. It
Mhm.
fit, and it fit good. And it just at least allowed me to have some control
Mhm.
of how I structured my life. And that's kind of what I've been working on since I realized I was autistic, is setting up a life and a lifestyle that work at least as well as they can for me, allowing me time, here and there in a day or in a week to just process and kind of get my brain back in order if I'm going too much. Because there's going to be situations where you're going to be forced to spend time in situations, in sensory problematic situations and this and that. And there's no making it a perfect world. So the thing I can do is have a quiet place I can come home to and process, whether that's for an hour or 2 hours or half a day when I need it. I can sometimes, by living pretty cheaply, sometimes that gives me the ability to say no to something, to a gig or some work that I know is going to be just too taxing for me in some way, or the travel is too much, and I know that by experience of doing it
Mhm.
and being in situations where I go, oh, I shouldn't have done this, you know, and that's a pretty good experience. Is still a pretty good teacher, and I made a note of that, and I went, maybe not schedule things so tightly if you can avoid it. I mean, we all have to make a living, but we all have to maintain our sanity too. So for us, I think that's just a little more prominent in the mix. So I'm thankful to have been able to make at least a decent income, modest though it is, to allow me to have a house and a car and a life and do the thing I love to do more than anything is a living and exist and have some food to eat at least occasionally. You know, uh,
Yeah.
I in my world that's an amazing victory. Now other people may look at this and go, well, I don't think he's doing that great, and in their world that may be very true. If for what their hopes and dreams are, that very well could be true. For me, I've found a pretty good balance, a pretty good work-life balance, and I'm always hoping for certain things to get better and certain things to increase or improve. But at least I have a template in place for kind of how I see after a period of years what I need and how to make my situation work for me.
What you are talking about, like not overscheduling, I know I run into that, and I think it's an AuDHD thing because the ADHD kind of has that fear of missing out. And I want to do all these things, and I have all these interests, and I want to do all of this,
Yeah,
which is super great, until it comes time to do that. And then the autistic part, who's bombarded with all of the sensory stuff and is just exhausted, is like, oh yeah, I agreed to do that, and I want to, I do, but I'm just so tired. And so it can be a conflict of the fear of missing out and the exhaustion, and then the feeling of, I'm so tired, but I've sucked because I'm not doing as much as I want to, and a lot of it,
yeah,
and it can be complimentary. Like I know, no, for me, I'm super organized and I have really great time management skills, and that's the autistic person imposing routine and structure on the ADHD part.
right,
But the ADHD part keeps the autistic person from being too rigid. So I don't have a problem with transitions or anything like that. Like in my case, it goes together so that it looks like everybody else. It looks like I have a good balance, and it does. But I know I personally have to be mindful of not overextending myself, but also not becoming like a complete slug sitting in the dark, trying to, you know what I mean? Like you have to
right,
balance all of this. And depending on how each side can shake down for you, you might have more adjustment to do on one side or the other, right? The other thing,
right,
and I know I won't keep you, but the hierarchy thing. So yeah, so for for neurodivergent peoples, we're actually very collaborative, and we want to do a good job, and we give honor where honor's due and respect where it's due, and that kind of thing. But I know, like for me, I don't have an actually internalized system of hierarchy in the same way that everybody else does.
No, clearly, I
Yes.
don't either.
So for me, like, if something's your job, you say you're the boss, right? Okay, I give you respect, honor that that's your position. That doesn't mean you're better than me. That means that's your job, you know,
Could be
and then
worse.
my job is this. And so I'm very egalitarian. And I've managed staff in many industries over the years, and I still approach it this way. It's like, okay, my job is to do this, and I have to make the hard decisions and whatever, but you do, you know, like it's this kind of thing. And I don't see this subjugation kind of thing, right? It's collaboration rather than subjugation, which is not the standard in the corporate world, right? And you're supposed to suck up the subjugation kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and I think for a lot of our community, that can be very hard. And because we tend to be very honest and direct and want justice, um, navigating that can be super tricky. And especially if something doesn't make sense, right? If you're like, okay, this
It-
is illegal or unethical, or it's just illogical,
or
or
creepy.
like it doesn't, like, why? This doesn't make any sense, you know? And so it's like, why would you not do something that makes sense? But that's not the thought process, right? This is us. And so that's when you can become the problem, because you're too logical and too egalitarian and too collaborative and, you know, too ethical, or whatever. And so I think for a lot of us, it's not that we're rude or insubordinate or questioning authority in the way that neurotypicals perceive this, right? We're not doing that. We're questioning the validity and the practicality and the logic and the ethical or moral implications of decision rather than the authority of the person, right? It's how valid is this when you take all these other things into account, regardless of who's making the decision. And that's just not really the paradigm. And I think for a lot of us, we can try to suck it up and press through it and learn after a while not to ask questions unless you really have to, because they're going to assume that you're undermining them and you're arguing and then I think a lot of it can just get to the point of, this is crap, this is stupid, I don't agree with this, it's not even logical, we're not even producing this, you know, like, there's all these things. And so it kind of can unravel, just because we just think a different way.
We do. I mean, I didn't even realize it for a long time. And I would see that some people would kind of look as though they were expecting a certain kind of treatment from me or something that I was not even aware
Mhm.
enough to give, and would have been creeped out if I was aware enough, because I can only say that people fawning over me totally creeps me out, and I don't like it. Let alone the idea of fake fawning over someone else with mock sincerity when I may or may not, feel that it's true or warranted. And yeah, that's got me in a pickle a few times. Um, I don't know. I just try to at least be at least be kind and supportive and nice without being obsequious, and just, hi, how are you? It's great to see you, and hope that that's okay. Because maybe before that I would have just had a blank look on my face, and they're expecting to be patted on the back and stuff. So I just try to, if I can find a smile, a real smile, do that, or say hello and just try to be constructive. It's all I know to do.
It is, and I think for so many of our community, just that obsequious pandering is repulsive and
It is.
sometimes just almost impossible to summon it up. You know what I mean? Like you can try to
It,
okay, let me pretend to be, you know, and it's not coming because it's just
yeah, and then you see
it's
it
foreign
work.
to us. Yes,
You see
absolutely.
some people actually benefit by that, and you go, wow, you know, what is that? So
And
yeah,
that's why for a lot of us, it's so funny, and then I'll let you go, is, when I like the first time I walked into a NAPS meeting and I was listening to people, and I was like, finally, I'm in a room full of normal people.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was all, other neurodivergent people, and when we have the same
Right.
paradigm, and I was like, I'm talking to normal people who are logical and they understand things. I'm not dealing with a room full of crazies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They say what's on their mind. They say what, it's like, I love that, you know, to
And
a
that's yes, and that's one thing that I love so much about our community. It's not that we're all homogenous by any stretch or have the same worldviews or agree or anything, but we say what we mean, and we've thought about what we mean before we say it. Even if it may not be delivered in the most eloquent way in some cases or acceptable or whatever. But we're also aware of that. And so we allow grace for each other of, hey, well, I actually meant this and blah, 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 and it's just, I don't know, to me, communication is just so much easier. But anyway, thank you so much for taking
Thanks
time
for
to
having me. I'm glad to be here.
us and to share. And it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to have you. So thank you for being part of our music here in Nashville and for being part of NAPS. And yeah, so I won't keep you. I know we all got things to do or sometimes things not to do, which is equally as wonderful
Yep.
when we have that occasion. So yeah, thank you so much. And we will catch you another time. You take care.
Okay. Bye bye.